years ago, Tara decided enough is enough. We have to find a way to help our family and others through crises like this, and started the Nichols Center. She, along with many others she has partnered with, have helped so many families in and around Douglasville. If you think there aren't good people in this world anymore, pay attention tonight and you'll see different. After we lost Clark, my daughter was still fighting a losing battle with drug addiction. She had gotten pregnant, and after the baby was born, John and I brought her home from the hospital. After many times of having to go find her and bring her home, I was at my wit's end as to what to do. So I decided I would go to the juvenile court judge and wait until I could get an audience with her to see what I could do. So off I went. And waited for this judge to listen to what I had to say. My granddaughter called the courthouse the place we cried for years until she was old enough to understand. This leads me to introduce to you the hero of my life, who I am convinced saved my granddaughter's life by giving me custody of my child. Judge Peggy H. Walker, retired but not really.
My career path was not really an intentional plan. It is a combination of my talents, my experiences, but most of all, my passion. Like Susie, like Tara, my family also struggled and suffered from substance abuse. I remember my great uncles dying of acute alcoholism. I lost my father to suicide at the peak of his alcoholism when I was 8 years old. And my sister died of alcoholism at the age of 49. And she left 3 children as well. So the journey to recovery is something that I'm extremely passionate about, and that I simply don't take no for an answer, because I believe that everyone should have the chance to achieve recovery. And it's our job as members of the community to give them that opportunity to do so. And the Nichols Center is certainly one of those important places in our community, and I'm proud to be here, and I'm proud to help in that work. I followed in the footsteps of my mother. My mother was an Atlanta school teacher in Oakland City, and she taught children in extreme poverty, and she absolutely loved those children passionately. And she believed that if you taught a child to read, you opened the door for breaking the cycle of poverty. We now know for a fact that education is the key to breaking the cycle of poverty and causing serious, important change that all of us need. She was a very strong person, a very determined person. I followed in her footsteps. I got my degree in education. I taught school in Clayton County. And I was drawn to children who had behavior problems. I wanted to know, how do you do that? And I had a way of engaging those children, getting those children to learn, getting those children to behave. In fact, when I was out on maternity leave, I had a class of nearly 40 children for an extended period of time in the middle of the day when lunch break occurred, so you have them for an hour and 40 minutes. And they ended up dividing my class of 40 among 3 teachers because nobody could handle them. When I came back, they said, how do you do that? I said, I love them. I talk to them. I can relate to them. And it was that passion for children that led me eventually to make that career change and to go to law school. When I was entering law practice in this community, I moved to this community. I knew my sister and her 2 children, and that was the reason I was in the community, because somebody needed to look out for my nieces while my sister was drinking. And this way, when school couldn't find my sister, they could always find me. But that's what brought me to Douglas County. But at any rate, what I began doing was going over to the juvenile court and saying, look, I have this master's degree in education, I love children, I'm really good with children, what can I do? And ultimately, that volunteering for the juvenile court is what led to my career. I began my work as an associate judge, and I worked as a judge pro tem from 90 to 93, and then from 93 to 98, I worked as the associate judge. And I was dealing with delinquent children and children who had status offenses. And I was really frustrated because I was working, trying to change their behavior, but nothing really changed. And eventually, it dawned on me that the only way to affect change in a child is to affect change in family. So when I had the opportunity to become the full-time juvenile court judge, I moved from the delinquency to the dependency. And the interesting thing about the dependency work is that I would focus on the older children, and then I thought, no, I've got to back it up, I've got to go to the younger children. Well, in the last years of my work, I actually focused on pregnant women because you have to start even before the beginning to affect change. Because you want people to be healthy, you want them to be happy, you want them to be successful, and substance use interferes with that. I have to get to my next talking point. I used to remember all these transitions. Oh well. I had the opportunity to work with an organization nationally called Drug and Native Children. And this was during the early 2000s when we had so many issues with them. And I anticipated when we did a survey of our delinquent children who were in state's custody because of the child's behavior, that we would have maybe a third of them who had parents that had substance use issues. When we got the results back, we were stunned. 95% of the children who were committed to the Department of Juvenile Justice for delinquent behavior had one or more parents with a substance use issue. And then I knew what the focus of my work had to be. I had to focus on substance use. It was very rare for me to serve any family in any capacity that did not have a substance use problem in the 2,000 cases a year that we typically saw in the juvenile court of Douglas County. It's not so simple though. Substance use isn't the only issue that presents. We have many people who have substance use issues. 2/3 of those also have a mental health diagnosis. And with that mental health diagnosis, if we don't treat both simultaneously, we cannot be successful. The other thing that I learned was that you have substance use, you have mental health issues of depression, anxiety, bipolar, post-traumatic stress disorder, but you also have a tremendous overlap with domestic violence. Domestic violence is not revealed until someone's in a safe place. And that's what the Nichols Center is a safe place. Those who have experienced domestic violence also experience sexual assault. More than half of the victims, sometimes as many as 2/3 of the victims, have been sexually assaulted. But this does not come out until there's long-term trust. And it is important for us to build that and provide that opportunity of that long-term trust in places like the Nichols Center, because you have to be able to heal from the trauma before you can leave the substance abuse. I had the opportunity to do a lot of work with the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges around trauma. I had the opportunity in this state, with the help of the Carter Center and with Justice for Children, to travel around the state, educating people on how to be trauma informed. But we learned that that's not enough to educate. We have to be trauma responsive. So what does trauma responsive mean? It means that everything changes. We have to change what we do, realizing what our neighbors, our family members, our clients, what they have experienced. It's important in our community that we know, first of all, what are our issues, what are our resources, what are our services, what are our gaps, and how do we begin as a community to fill those gaps. That's how I met Tara. She came to Douglas Corps, and if you're not familiar with communities organizing resources for excellence, it's really important. It's really important that we all know what each other's doing, because there's not enough resources for us to take the work. We all have to take our part and do our part. So that's why CORE is so critically important. Susie, Tara wanted to know, well, what can we do? And we began to talk about the gaps, and we began to talk about the rigors and the importance of doing the documents and getting the tax exempt status. And that is how we met, and how my work with the Nichols Center began was, okay, let's start with figuring out how to do 501c3. That's important. The trauma work really changed everything. And it's particularly important for me because I know that I'm followed by someone who's going to be able to identify with that tremendously. And I'm really excited, we're going to hear from her. And I was thrilled the moment that I walked off the steps to be greeted by her and to be greeted by Susie, because there's nothing like coming home. Because that's what it feels like when you get to see the family that you have acquired through your work. But what we began to think about was, how can we better serve those with substance use, those with trauma. And we had the opportunity to apply for a federal grant, and we got the money to start a family treatment court. And that literally helped us turn everything upside down and inside out and do it right. Because it's important to treat people with compassion. It's important to be patient. It's important to let them have a say in what they need. It's very important, though, to always hold them accountable for the choices that they make, but in a compassionate way, and in a way that you don't drive them away. So we want to make sure that we're not doing anything that's going to cause any kind of additional harm. The classic approach to trauma has always been talk therapy. But what we don't know, and what we didn't know, and what we didn't understand, is why talk therapy doesn't work for people with trauma. Children who have experienced trauma do not develop language in the same way that children that have not had trauma do. And so you have to look at art, you have to look at music, you have to look at play. And it's the same thing for adults. Some people cannot find the words to tell you what they have experienced. And our job is to help them heal, and however it is that they need to do that. We have to be at the cutting edge, and that's where the Nichols Center is. They're already understanding that healing can come from movement. Healing can come from meditation. Healing can come from yoga. Those are unique ways that we're just beginning to understand how to rewire the brain after these traumatic events. Tonight, I challenge each of you to treat those with substance use with compassion and not with judgment. I challenge you to offer them a hand in making connections. You have no idea how difficult it is to get to treatment until you try to get someone to treatment. And try to imagine struggling with substance use and try to negotiate that system. I have 3 degrees, and it's definitely difficult for me to get anybody into treatment, much less someone who is struggling. I challenge you to educate yourselves on childhood adverse experiences. If you've never looked at the ACEs study, it impacts the health, it impacts the mental health of the child and the adult for the rest of their lives, and it shortens the life cycle. We have to stop the adversity that our children face in their childhoods so that they have healthy childhoods. I challenge you to learn terminology that is compassionate. Don't use the term addict. Don't use the term dirty drug screens. There's whole new terminology that takes all of this trauma science into consideration. We don't look at substance use as a character flaw. It is a brain and a chemistry issue that is very treatable. I challenge you to change your beliefs and your practices as you learn more about the science of substance use, treatment, and recovery. And finally, I challenge you to support innovation and service here at the Nichols